for us to get together and think about how you would have us live. I pray that you would bless our time, that it would be edifying, and that we would all go home ready to do more work for your kingdom. Okay, I always love talking to a room full of women because I feel it's like unexploded diamond. I mean, like there's so much potential in this room, you know what I mean? So many people that we, you know, we gather together all these women, and how many people do we represent that we have an impact on, and what are they going to do? You know, like it's just so much potential in the room. But it's also like all of us are so different, and we have such different circumstances, and our little worlds are completely unique, even though we have much in common. And so it feels like, as nice as it would be to have a one-size-fits-all, here's what it looks like, it's just impossible. You can't do that. And whenever anyone does start selling the checklist, here's what it looks like to be a Christian mom, or here's what it looks like to be a Christian wife, it's usually, that's your first sign that this is not good. As soon as it becomes a cookie cutter thing. But there are obviously some guiding principles that we should all share, and then we need to go out and figure out how to apply those things in our own lives. And one of the things I love is that when Paul says older women teach the younger women how to do these things, he does not then launch a checklist, right? He doesn't say, make sure you cover the dishes, talk about the menu planning schedule. Like he leaves it to the women. It's like so much trust that these older women will have something, and that they are experts in their field, that they can actually hand something off to the younger women. And I always think that that's kind of hilariously one of the signs you know the Bible was inspired, because you know if it was written by just human, you know, ideas, it would have been, here's how long your toga must be, here is how much time you must spend drying the flax on your roof. You know, things that would immediately become inapplicable to us as soon as times changed or it's a different culture. But saying older women teach the younger women how to do this, and then that's it, is like that actually is applicable across every continent, across every century, because we're all supposed to take what we know of God and His Word and then work it out in our own space. But we live in a weird moment, I think, historically, where older women don't have much to say, because we kind of shook the Etch-a-Sketch with feminism over the last 100 years, and then a lot of us don't even know what it looks like. You know, there's so many young women that want to figure out how to be on the or whatever, and there's nobody to ask, because all the women above them in the church, you know, they grew up with a career mom, and they're a career woman, and nobody's really doing anything at home. And so it is culturally a really weird moment. Granted, of course, is Texas considered the South, or is that insulting if I say we're in the South? Not the South. We're in the South. Okay. See, that's what I thought. It's like, no, we're not in the South, we're just Texas. Well, you do have more going for you down here. How's that? Because I'm from the Pacific Northwest. It's much younger. You know, like I remember our state centennial parade when I was a kid. It's still weirdly kind of unsettled, and it's like the one city we have is Seattle, which is Portland. Not really known for gracious hospitality and everything, so it's kind of like we got Nirvana, we did that. So it really is a very different culture. It's a younger culture. There's less tradition. There's less, you know, it's a very different kind of place. So I feel like we might be trying to reinvent the wheel up in Idaho, where you guys might have more going for you in terms of like having more to look at culturally and that kind of thing. But feminism really has done a weird thing to what women have to offer each other. Because I think one of the primary things, well, for one thing, we've fought so hard for women's rights that now we don't know what a woman is, which I think is quite funny. You know, couldn't rightly say what a woman is. Don't ask these difficult questions. And we're in such a funny moment that when Trump says two genders, we're all what great news. It's like that just tells you what a weird, you know, terrible chaos we live in, where even that is for, what's she supposed to do, how's she supposed to do it? These are all questions that are incredibly controversial, and among the Christians as well. It's very controversial. And so I think what has happened is we have all these confusing, conflicting worldview claims about what is a woman and what she's for and what's her calling. But I think the primary thing that women got convinced of over the last century is that the home is the place where you go to wither and die, right? Like that's the place where you go if you are kind of a low achiever. And if you want to have ambition, if you want to be a high achieving woman, well, you go out and do it out there. And just by way of context, I mean, I have 5 kids. I've never been a feminist. Felt like it a few times with some of the guys who meet. However, I haven't been a feminist. But I've had multiple jobs. Like I am not in any way saying, you shouldn't have a paycheck. Paychecks somehow taint you. That's not the point. But it is clear from Scripture that the home is something unique that women are to be geared towards. And I think that along with the confusion of what is a woman, what is the home is, I think, actually a question that we lost track of even earlier. And I think that the Victorians were kind of the villains on this, actually. Where I think what has happened is, a century and a half ago, we had this notion developed that home is supposed to be this very sentimental space that is organized and perfect and clean and calm, and it's a retreat from the world, right? The world is out there, and then this is like your retreat zone. And I think that was even upstream from all this other stuff about what a woman is supposed to do, because if you start thinking that the home is almost like backstage, right? The real world is out there on the stage, and the home is like backstage. Nothing really is happening there. You're just getting the costumes ready for the people who are going to go out and do the thing, the real work that's out there. And I think that once you say that, and then you say, and also women, you got to be back there. You have to be backstage and fix a snack for the people who are doing real work for when they come home. And then you're supposed to keep it this perfect little space that is a retreat and it's calm, it's quiet, it's pious and everything. It actually does really reduce your calling to something that doesn't really matter. It's off stage. It's like the real work is here, that's the world. That's where you can have a mission you can achieve. But women, you go back here and you just kind of keep the home fires burning and don't do anything. And I think when you start thinking of the home like that, regardless of what you think a woman should do, should she be in the home or should she be allowed to be out on the stage? If you think of the home like that, it necessarily starts shrinking the walls of what you can achieve, right? It's the ceiling is getting lower and lower, the walls are getting smaller and smaller, and then our job becomes nothing more than just trying to maintain this little static bubble. And I really think that that is, so many women who may have thought they rejected feminism still kind of think of the home as that. And so I think there's almost like a natural selection thing that kind of happens as well. Because some women are really drawn to that because they are scared of doing things that are important, or they might be naturally more timid. They're not ambitious. The last thing they want is to shoot for something bigger. So it's like, yes, put me in a nice little quiet back corner where nothing matters too much. And then women who are ambitious, who are driven, who want to get things done, they go out there into the real world to get things done. And then you kind of have this divide, because then you have the women who are at home, the ones who are giving us the examples of what it looks like, are kind of the ones who are like, don't talk to me, I'm just going to be here doing my little thing. And so I think we've just gotten so mixed up on so many categories. And I think that actually, I would argue the home is a place that matters extremely in the world. It is not backstage. It is one of the most fundamental, important places. And I think we can come to that conclusion in multiple ways. One is Scripture tells half the human race to pay attention to this, so probably it matters. we can start to feel like God just doesn't like women, he just doesn't want them to do anything nice. Or maybe we could trust him and think, well, if he told half the human race to do it, maybe it's important. You know, maybe we ought to try and give ourselves to that. I think we can figure it out, you know, from scripture. I think we can figure it out from natural revelation and just looking at, you know, how the human race has gotten to where it's gotten. But I also think if we just look at the emphasis that feminism has placed on convincing us all that it doesn't matter, that's a lot of energy to spend to convince us that something doesn't matter. And I think even if you think about a war, an actual war, you do not have one army spend all their time, all their resources, all their lives, all their ammunition, all their money on a target that doesn't matter at all. You know, like if they are throwing everything they have at this one military target, you can assume it's a strategic and important place to take. It's a capital city, it's an important port, it's a pass through the mountains. It's something that matters a lot. So why is it that the feminists have spent a century and a half trying to convince us that of all places where you should not be is the home? Because you could do anything else, like literally anything else, and get the approval of everyone. You know, you could say, I'm quitting my job at the bank to go breed llamas, and they'll be like, so great, follow your dreams. You know, you could be like, I'm going to become a therapist for cats, and they'll be like, such a wonderful calling. Because I have kids, so I'm going home, they're like, how dare you know, portray women like that. It's really, so much disdain comes with that choice more than other choices. And why is it, like, so many commercials, so many movies, so many TV shows, so much of our pop culture is aimed at making us all believe that the one place that you will be wasted as a woman is in the home. And when you have like a sort of God-hating establishment that spent that much time on messaging, we ought to assume that they know it's strategic, or else why do they care? Like, why do they care if we're in the home? But they will do everything they can to get us out of it. And I think just purely from the perspective of why do they mind if women are in the home? Now, of course, it's all phrased as it's about you, right? We're just thinking of you. You will be victimized if you're in the home. You will be squelched. Your dreams will not come true. You're not fulfilling yourself. And I'm only thinking of you. You need to come over here. They never say that if you're going to get a dead-end corporate job. You know, they're not going to be like, filing all those papers is just going to be soul-sucking. They don't do that, but it is soul-sucking if you're taking care of your children, if you're just driving carpool, you know, whatever. And so often we get the just, you know, you're just a homemaker. You're just taking care of your kids. You're just making dinner. There's a lot in that just, oh, so you're just a homemaker then. And I think then we have some women, like I was saying earlier, who kind of do want it to be a little bit of a low-achieving, you know, let's just keep this nice and tidy and small. And that's not helping our cause either. You know, the whole, I mean, the internet has also made everything a little crazier because I feel like for a long time we just had the one mainstream media kind of came to us all through official approved channels. You know, it was like there was Hollywood, there were news networks, everything was kind of, the messaging was tight. And now, you know, the internet is a whole wild west of chaos, and so you have the child-free influencers. I just learned that that's what we call it, child-free. I was really surprised. It's like childless, yes, but child-free influencer lifestyle is a big deal. And then you have the trad life thing happening. I read this news article that was kind of contrasting both of them. You'll never believe which side they were on. But when I'm looking at the trad, you know, accounts that they were citing, I mean, they really aren't terrible. They're just really appalling, and they are not helping us out. Because it's a lot of women that are like, I just don't want the stress that I saw my mother go through. Like, my mother worked a job, and then she tried to clean the house, and it was just too much, and so I just want to, you know, basically, I don't want to be ambitious. I don't want to work hard. What I want to do is play dress-ups at home. So I try to have a Marilyn Monroe haircut, and I follow 1940s checklists, and I cook 1940s recipes, and I dress in 1940s clothes. And basically, I'm just playing dress-up off in the corner by myself. And that's not helping us either, because it's like, well, that's surely not what God is calling us to, is a weird make-believe time. But go amuse yourself in the park, play with dolls or something. That can't be what he's calling us to. I mean, we have such a huge task before us as Christians in this world. You know, you have Adam and Eve given this job of fill the earth and subdue it. And if you ever think about that as two humans and an empty world, I mean, that's shocking. I actually don't like Milton, but I do love the last scene in Paradise Lost where they're walking out into a world that is also now not going to cooperate with them. And two people who have to fill the earth, and so it was huge, like massive job. And then you have the Great Commission. It's like the new covenant version of that. Go take the world. Like, here it is, go take it. And that was given to 12 guys. Like, go conquer the world. And we're not close yet. We have a huge job in front of us. And if God has told women, like, here's where you should stand in this as we advance the kingdom, then we should believe that there's value in standing in that place, right? And not just trying to make our life as easy and small as possible. And again, I think if we're thinking of the home wrong, in this kind of sweetsy Victorian way, it's like it's supposed to be a refuge, it's supposed to be a retreat, it's supposed to be calm, it's supposed to be pious, it's sort of the feminine, it's like the feminine world. And I think they were very mixed up too on lots of things, but what is a woman? You know, they had that kind of idea that women were naturally more pure than men, and the home is kind of that. And I do think if you think of the home like that as this kind of static thing that's supposed to be perfect all the time and organized and whatever, real life is messy, and it's hard, and it causes chaos in your nice little dollhouse that we've put together. And so you end up stripping things away. It's like, we're not going to do that because that makes a mess. We're not going to do that, stresses me out. We're not going to do that because it's just too chaotic. We're not going to, and your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller because you're just trying to maintain this little perfect thing. And I just think that we need to get rid of our notions that that is what a home is for, or that that's what a woman is called to create. And it's tricky because the Victorian idea was obviously much closer to the biblical reality than what we got now. You know, like now, home is what? I mean, it's you and your gay roommate and your cat. And that's like supposed to be a home. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like now we have this really chaotic view. And a home is nothing really more than a docking station where you just go to unplug after work. Like, you go home, you collapse, you sleep, you watch Netflix, you go back to work. And that's really it. It's your docking station. And so you look at the Victorian ideal and you're like, that seems much better, right? That seems more wholesome. It seems more like the biblical ideal. But if you think about, like, what if we managed to convince everybody that the perfect ideal woman is like somebody who's half Botox and implants and corsets and a bustle and fake eyelashes and, you know, like inflated lips. And like, that's the perfect woman. Well, that's just going to cause endless frustration, as we know, because nobody is actually like that. Nobody looks like that. And so the only way you can achieve it is through a lot of fake woman. You know, she's like 60% woman and the rest is, I don't know, synthetic substances. And the same thing I think happens with the home. It's like if we don't think of it as real, it's like this perfect, pristine thing. It's just frustrating because that's not the world God made. It's not how we live. And the only way to achieve it is by stripping everything away that is going to disrupt it. It's going to make a mess. That's going to be difficult. And so I do think we can find ourselves as, you know, if you are a homemaker, it's so easy to be like, what can I cut out that will make life easier for me? What can we do to have everyone not be hungry all the time? You know, it's like a constant, how can I shrink my duties? And I think if you look at your job in the home as sort of a checklist thing, like here's what I have to achieve and here's how I need to get there, and I'm reduced to this checklist. It really is turning your calling into a paint by numbers kit. And again, paint by numbers looks a lot better than what's coming out of most art departments. So I can see why people are like, it's a beautiful painting. But it's not great art, right? It's a very well, it's paint by numbers. And I think this happened, again, Victorians, I think they were worse than we know. If you think about the transition of speaking of domestic arts to domestic science, it's actually a huge, huge shift. Because art requires, well, talent and ability and hard work, and it's something that you can strive for, but domestic science is like, repeat this process and you will get the same result every single time. It is paint by numbers, right? Put the little color right here, it'll come out looking just like the front of the box. And I think when we changed our notion of women as, in the domestic arts to being domestic science, which we're going to give, we can give you a degree in it, we can give you all these little classes, we can, reduce it down. It did shrink our job quite a lot. And I think if you're thinking of it like art, where it's like, here's a canvas, here's the paint, what are you gonna make? That is a very different thing than just sit down and follow these step-by-step instructions. And I think for women who are naturally ambitious, and this is the only thing we think being a homemaker looks like, well, that is kind of, depressing. It does feel really and there's, life is still crazy and taking care of kids is hard and everything. But there are certain people that really appeals to. And what I'm saying is I think we need to recapture a vision of our home as actually something that we could turn into a masterpiece and not something that is just going to be this little kit that we can reproduce. But a masterpiece does take a lot of work, and it takes a lot of training, and it takes a lot of thought and a lot of time. Some people are going to be better at it than others. And I just think that is so much more fulfilling to be striving for. It's like the horizon is way out there instead of here's this tiny little life and just stay inside the lines and, stay backstage. So I think we have more to unlearn from feminism than just where is a woman supposed to stand, right? She's supposed to stand at work or she's supposed to stand at home. What if, they accept an income, or what if her husband is laid off, or what, we have all of those questions. Where is she allowed to stand? But I think we have, those are all important questions. But it is something a lot of Christians have spent a lot of time talking about, right? But I think recapturing the vision of home as something more potent and more powerful and more important and something that is worth spending your life on, that is something that is very hard to come by in this culture. There's people who have their perfect little Instagram houses, but there are very few people who are just trying to own the domestic space like that in an ambitious way. And it's sort of I understand, well, what are you talking about? What would that look like? I don't know, we should all go try and see what happens. Because I do think we have this weird, I think it's my grandmother's generation really, that kind of walked away from the home, and it really kind of is a blank. It's like when your computer crashes and you lost all your files. And it's such a different world right now than my grandmother's or my great-grandmother's generation. And I think that that's why there's this appeal in some of the trad stuff to do this pretend other generation. I'm going to pretend to be a pioneer wife, or I'm going to pretend to be a 1950s wife. Because they don't know what it looks like in the 21st century, and they don't have any idea how to put this together. So it's well, I saw a movie once, and I like the dresses, so I'm going to do that. And at least it's something, right? At least they're trying. But I think that there's so much more we could do to have it be actually relevant today, using the resources we have today, which are shocking compared to my great-grandmother's generation. And I think if we recovered this sense of the home as being this important and fulfilling place for a woman to stand and spend her life trying to become excellent at, I think it wouldn't turn out that we all reverted to the 19th century. I don't think that's going to be the result of it. I think we have to be good stewards of this new world that we have, this embarrassment of riches when it comes to the resources that we have available to us. And how are we going to gather that up and then just learn to be excellent here. And it's just like I said at the beginning, it's not going to be the same for all of us. I mean, we're in a very different part of the country. We all are married to different men. We have different economic situations. You know, there's so many variables that I think it is just incredible to think of how much there is, how much ground there is to cover for women, and how we can't reduce it to this one-size-fits-all, this is what a nice reformed wife does, right? Here's the duties of, you know, the day for her. And I think if you think about the sort of traditional spheres of government, you know, you have like the state, you have the church, you have the family. The family is the only one that's actually organically alive, right? I mean, the church grows through evangelism and people in the church having babies. But the family is the only one that actually multiplies within itself, right? State can conquer another state, I suppose, get bigger. But the family is unique in that it is weirdly alive and thriving. It's like, what's the difference between a family living in a home and just a group of roommates, right? Like, if a woman's calling is merely because we needed somebody to fold the socks and drive carpool, well, you actually could do that just with a roommate situation. Like, does a single man really need a wife, or could he have just hired a housekeeper and a chef? And there you go, he's got it covered. Like, does a wife bring anything to the equation aside from the logistical side? And she ought to, is my argument. It ought to be better than just like, yeah, the guys figured out amongst themselves who's gonna scrub the toilet when. You know, a group of roommates can figure that out. And a single man can actually do valuable work in the kingdom. So why does he need a wife? And it's got to be more than just, well, who else is going to make the sandwich? It's like, well, Arby's exists. You could have gone there. And so surely a wife is bringing something else to the equation. And I think, you know, if a group of roommates is like a flower in a vase, whereas a husband and wife is like a plant in the ground. It's going to grow. It's just like, it's alive, it's fruitful. And so we should think of our calling as like, okay, well, what's that about? What's it for? What's my role in this really unique situation that really is the core of the other spheres of government as well? You know, like the church is made up of families, the state is made up of families. And it is the presence of a woman in a home, a wife, let's say, and that covenant that creates this completely unique thing that is fundamental to the rest of society. And it is the woman's presence in the home that makes that into something potent. And it's by nature of the case, I can't just now give us a checklist of like, so anyways, here's what you're going to go home and do. But I do think we should think of like, okay, in the place where God has planted you, how can you double down and try to be excellent? And is there room to be ambitious in that place? So I would think the first thing is to stop trying to whittle down everything to make it all easier and more streamlined and more organized. I mean, well, you have to, it's a constant battle, you have to get more organized. But you know what I mean? Like, I've whittled my life down to 3 recipes on repeat, and that's it. You know, like there's always that temptation. Everyone in the house is going to have the same socks, so I never again have to match them. You know, whatever. Might be a good idea, actually. But, like, if it's a constant attempt to shrink our duties, then I would argue we're viewing our jobs like a minimum wage employee. Like, here's what I have to get done in a day. How can I cut corners, right? But think of the difference between that and an entrepreneur who's trying to build a business. An entrepreneur is putting in crazy hours. They're sacrificing because they're building something that they think matters, as opposed to the guy that you hired who doesn't really care about it. And I think lots of women can view their jobs like that. It's kind of like, what can I do to save myself a few steps today, rather than what can I do to build something that is going to be fantastic. And of course, that's going to be completely different for everyone. So I would think the first thing is not trying to always be shrinking, but how can I maximize? And then also kind of try to get rid of this notion that the home is supposed to be like a perfect plastic bubble that never gets messed up. because we should be thinking of it more like a factory that is producing something important and incredible. And yeah, that's going to cause chaos, and it's going to be a constant state of like cleaning up after everything and trying to, you know, how can we streamline and how can we maximize production and how can we, you know, all those questions, but you're looking at it very differently than how do we cut it all down. And yeah, an entrepreneur is never like looking for ways to shrink their business. You know, that's just like by definition, that's not how you're thinking about it. And I think an ambitious woman in the home should be the same. You're never thinking like, how can I shrink my job a little further? But like, how can I just maximize this? And if you think about a trampoline, you know the double bounce where you can bounce the other person really high. That really should be our goal. Like, we are trying to figure out the double bounce for this family. You know, like, what can I do as a mother that is going to make us fly? As opposed to being the one annoying kid who's lying down in the middle, you know, like, stop it, until everyone comes to a halt. You know what I mean? And you can steal someone's bounce. You remember that? There's a lot of women out there stealing their husband's bounce. It's like, they really are. It's like, what can I do to make this whole thing stop moving? As opposed to like, how can I make this go? And I just think asking those questions, what can I become excellent at? Well, it's going to be as different as the number of women in this room. Like, what has God made you good at? What has He given you that you are gifted at and that you love doing and you have the opportunity to do? And my grandpa always used to say, the way you know what the will of God is for you is that what are your gifts, what are your abilities, and what are your opportunities? Because when those three things line up, obviously, there's some other qualifications, you know. It's a Christian idea. There's some things that should be off the table. But, you know, if you're trying to decide, like, I have this job opportunity or that one, what should I pursue? He would always say, what are your gifts? Like, what are you actually good at? Because you might want to be an opera singer and you can't carry a tune. So that would be off the table for you, right? You're not good at it. And you might want to be good at it, but, you know, what are your gifts? What are your desires? Like, what do you actually love to do? And then what are your opportunities? You might have a great voice and nobody's hiring you to be an opera singer. It's not an opportunity. So when those things line up, like, what are you good at? What has God gifted you at? What do you want to do? And then how can you use those things and point them at your people, at your home, and just try to maximize it? And it's just going to be so different because God has made us all very different. You know, the different parts of the body and metaphor just continues to be true. He's got women who are really good at some things and other women who are very good at something else. And then we get to kind of cross-pollinate and learn from each other. And I think it's the most impressive thing when you have women who all start doing that in their own spot. There is so much you can learn from each other. And we know that already. I mean, you know, you see your friend did something and you're like, oh my goodness, that's a great idea. And you get that recipe or you decide, oh, that's really fun, I should learn how to make pasta. Or, you know, whatever it is, we often grab things from the women around us. So I think when you have a group of women who all kind of commit themselves to something like this, the potential is huge. And I think it's so interesting that, the U.S. is a huge country, obviously, and we have some regional differences, but there's also a lot of generic sameness, right? Like, a lot of America is exactly like the rest of America. So I could drive from Moscow to Austin, and I could eat the identical meal the entire way if I wanted. You know, I could get the same exact snacks at the same exact gas stations the whole entire way. And there's huge blessings in that. Like, that's actually amazing. And we have an impressive country, and I don't think we should be disdainful of that. But how much of that is because women walked away from their jobs, and we had to outsource to corporate America to do it for us because there's not mom at home, right? And it's funny how impressive it is, but also how kind of soulless it is. Because if I dropped you in a parking lot and you didn't know where you were and And I was like, figure it out. They're like, well, there's the AT&T, and there's the TJ Maxx, and there's a Nordstrom, and there's a Starbucks. What town are you in? So anywhere, like anywhere. And how much of our economy is just simply in feeding people that mom's not feeding, right? I did look up some of the statistics, I can't remember what they are. Shocking amounts of money that Americans spend. And it's funny because how many jobs is that providing? So many jobs, how many of them are women? It's sort of like the women walked out of the home, left a gaping wound at home, and then went to join the men as they all tried to make a prosthetic limb for this leg we cut off. You know, I mean, it's a very strange thing. And I think if women were actually invested in their homes, I think it would actually turn out we would get regional differences real fast, which would be really interesting. You know, because one time I did the math because I just lived in Cincinnati or somewhere, and I checked, and the distance from Moscow to Cincinnati was greater than Berlin to Baghdad, which is hilarious. If you think about the number of cultures you would have to cross to go from Berlin to Baghdad. I mean, different holidays, different foods, different traditions. I mean, different clothes, different everything. And Moscow to Cincinnati, yeah, I could eat the identical food the whole way. And if I wanted to taste regional cuisine, where would I go? Like, if anybody asked me what's regional cuisine in Idaho, I'd be like, I don't know. We got McDonald's. You know, like, there's just, it's an interesting thing that we have become very homogenized. And I think a lot of that is just because we had to sort of mass manufacture making up for the lack of families. You know, everybody's still hungry, they still have to eat. So we figured out how to streamline it, how to freeze it, how to package it, how to send it across the whole country. And it's really impressive, and it's a huge blessing. As you know, like, when life is crazy, it's nice that you can just grab something to eat. But at the same time, like, I think if we had women all diving in a, like, actually, we're gonna get good at this here, it's like, do you all follow the pasta grannies? Have you seen the pasta grannies? It's really fascinating. It's like an Instagram account. It's like old women, like 90 in their 90s, some are over 100 in Italy making pasta. And it's just like, oh, this is that one village, and this is what they make. This is their traditional noodle shape, and they always do it with a sauce or whatever. And those are the kinds of things that do develop when you have women who are planted, and they're learning from each other, and they're getting better, and they're pursuing it. Something really interesting develops. And it's going to look totally different than the other church in the other state. It's just going to look different. And I think as we start to try to get a little bit of momentum on this, then we will have women that the younger women can turn to and say, like, okay, I see what that looks like. Because I used to teach lit, and Sir Philip Sidney is a 16th century poet. And he uses this example of if you're trying to describe to a person what an elephant looks like, so that they can, like, draw it, but they've never seen an elephant, it's real rough, you know. It's really difficult to try to explain it such that they can draw it such that they now know what it looks like. Show them an elephant, and it's like, oh, yeah, okay. And I think that's the case. You know, once we manage to recapture, I feel like we're kind of in that initial generation of what does an elephant look like, as a matter of fact. And the last time we had a picture of women doing this, it was a totally different world, like a completely different world. So we can't just grab that and repeat it. We have to learn from it, but we have to be creative, and we have to be innovative, and we have to, like, throw ourselves at this. But as we start to regain that, then we can become the older women who actually can pass this on to our daughters, and they can build on our shoulders and keep going. And so I just think there is a huge amount of room and scope for ambition in our space in the home, and I don't know what it would look like, but I would be really excited to see what it would look like if women decided to try to really own this space and throw themselves at it like it matters. So that is what I had prepared, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to open it up. Or not. Yeah.
So I grew up in Western Washington. I know exactly what you mean about
Pacific Northwest.
yes, starting from scratch. in so many ways. And for some who's at the point now where I still have a kid in high school, but one in college, and just kind of looking at the ambition that I had when I started out, knowing nothing.
Yeah.
And making a go at it, and now kind of reflecting, like, it's kind of disheartening to see some of the mistakes that I've made. Like, how do you reflect on that and, like, think about the principles? To kind of evaluate. Here's what I did wrong, here's what I,
Yeah.
how do you move on from there?
Right. Well, I love something my dad says all the time, which is God always picks us up where we are and not where we should have been. So that's a comfort, you know. And I would just say, you know, if you made mistakes in the past, if they're sinful mistakes, confess them and then you're forgiven, you know. Like, move on. It doesn't mean there's no, like, fallout from them or things you have to, but you certainly don't need to sit and guilt trip yourself about it. It's like, we're Christians. We believe in forgiveness. And then it's like, okay, here I am as a result of all that. Thankfully, God has forgiven me. Or it's just maybe it's just stupid stuff. You know, you wish you hadn't done, or you wish you'd known it earlier. And if that's the case, well, it's like, well, welcome to life, because that's where every human is, right? And so as long as we are alive, we have the opportunity in front of us of, like, learn more, get better, you know, pursue this, correct the mistakes that I can, or learn from them, and just try. And I would just say, don't get too bogged down in regrets, because that can be honestly just forgetting the gospel, or it can just be a huge distraction, and then you're not doing anything productive because you're thinking about the other time you didn't do anything productive.
How often do you go grocery shopping? Not right now, but maybe like 10 years ago.
Yes. Right now it's full chaos. When we were first married, I really would plan out the menu for the week, and then I would go once a week, and then inevitably you forgot something, so you didn't grab it. But I would try to do a once a week thing. And then just that worked great when my kids were little, and my mom was a saint, and on Mondays she would babysit the kids, and I could go to the grocery store and get my other errands done. That was massive. And then, yeah, just different phases of life are so different, and we just have to be able to adapt. And I do think women can get into their routine and refuse to adapt, and everyone else has to conform to the schedule instead of the schedule conforming to the people. And I think that's a constant thing to try to keep in front of your mind is my little system meant to serve the people, or are my people here to serve my system? And so being willing to just change it as you know, different phases hit. We would always sit down as a family for dinner, like, you know, forever. And then my kids, who are very close together, all had sports at the same time. And then it was just like, I don't even know. So if I had clung to that, like, no, we will sit down at 6, and then you're not doing that too, because we're, you know, it's going to throw off my meal plan. And so for a while, we're like, you know what? We're going to eat whenever the people are here. So sometimes it would be early, most of the time it would be late. So we often would eat at 8:45 or something when everybody got home. Not every time, sometimes, you know, we make it work. And then they hit the age of sports where that actually, no, nobody's going to be home. So then we just wait till we have a quorum of people. And, you know, so you just have to keep adapting. But anyway, in the early years, it was just lovely. I had a great little system of once a week. That was my dream. And I still, maybe we'll get back to that.
So in looking at art throughout, I guess, the centuries, women in art and therapy, but in the past, I guess, 100 or so years, women have not only did art and it's been exclusive with Picasso or constructed figures. Do you think that the disassociation of women and beauty is reflected in
Oh, huge. I mean, I think there's been a simultaneous war on women, as we can just see, like to the point where now it's like, we can't say what one is, you know, a direct assault on women and what they're for and where they should be. So, you know, everything from the whole war on children really was to serve this, like, get you out of the home. And the problem is children are impediment to a career, so we gotta get rid of kids, you know. So just a real attack on women, but the attack on beauty has been simultaneous and, yeah, very much, I would say, all part of the same project. Seems like kind of like a big battle. It's like two different ends of the same battle is this attack on beauty, and I think that's absolutely the case. And that is so widespread through our architecture, through our art, through, you know, everything. It's been like this, in the same way that we want to say there is no difference between a man and a woman, we want to say there is no such thing as beautiful and ugly. You can't possibly say that something is beautiful, something is ugly. And this inversion of things that are ugly, we have now declared them to be beautiful, is happening like at the same time that this man, who's obviously a man, we're saying he's a woman, you know, it's this war to like impose our will on creation. And I think it's a really, I mean, if you think about the opening of Scripture as God says, let there be light, and there is light, it feels like this is our attempt to be like, no, 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 we're going to say, let there be beauty. You know, like we want to be able to simply pronounce, and this is what it is. We want reality to conform to our announcements, just like it does to God's. It feels like a usurping of God's authority almost, and it's this desire to be able to change the definitions of things. So I think, yeah, the war on beauty is, I think, one of the most important things going on, and it's so connected to women because that is, in so many ways, our domain, you know. So yeah, I think that's a huge issue. Yeah.
So if you were going to go give this talk next to all of our husbands, hey, you want this? They're going to be entrepreneurial. They're going to multiply the household. What's, you know, what would you say to them? How to support?
So, well, to start with, just to be clear, I wouldn't go give a talk to all your husbands. I would think my husband would give a talk to your husband. No, I think in a more like broad societal way, I think we all probably know, like, I'm assuming you all are with me on this, we all know women need love, men need respect, right? That's what God commands in Scripture. Respect your husbands, love your wives, it means they need that, right? But I think it's also true that women need respect and men need love too. And so I think broadly from a more societal perspective, and I think certainly in the church, we need to recover a respect for the work, because I think that's what drives a lot of the feminist thing, is we want to do important work. Like God created women to work. And I think that's one of the things that has gone really wrong, is when we think that women are supposed to be, you know, nice and love and hate and pretty and stay there and just look photogenic. It's not how God made women. Like, He made us to work and to work hard and to want to do something important. And so I think if we have a low view of the work in the home, it's just hard for women. I mean, we have to do it anyways, whether or not we get respect for it, because God told us to, right? But it certainly is easier when it's cutting with the grain of like, everyone does agree that this is really difficult and important work. And I think I've seen a lot of, I was actually fussing with my husband about this yesterday in the car. I've seen a lot of well-meaning pastors who are completely checked out on this whole subject. When they try to give a good example, it's the worst. It's so bad. It'll be like, so to be ready for marriage, men need to, and they'll have this huge list of things, you know, like you need to have saved up enough money to buy a house, and you need to be skilled in this trade, and that other thing. And it'll be like, and girls should have memorized 4 recipes. And you're like, well, that's just rude. It's like, is that supposed to be something that is like hard to get to? And I know that it's just because they don't know what they're talking about, you know? It's like they don't have the vocabulary. It's a good point. She's trying to make less is hard, right? But at the same time, it's like surely women should be more skilled than just that. I mean, that's a little something you could whip up in 15 minutes. Anyway. I think having more of a like actual admiration and respect for this work, instead of And I think some of the people who are trying to recover it are recovering a lot of bad stuff that we should have left behind, because it can be like, don't worry, your pretty little head. You know, you just go over there and fix us a sandwich. And that is not admiring the work of a woman as if it was important, vital work, you know. So I would say that. I would just say trying to, but honestly, I think too, we can't sit around and wait for that to happen. We have to become the kind of women that are like, actually, hey now, that's pretty impressive, right? And so I would say, you know, the advice they give for writers is show, don't tell. I would just say that should be what we are aiming for, show. Just try and get good at it, and then I think the response would come. But I do think it would be helpful if the church broadly looked up to it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious, you know, when you think about, you're talking about like kind of reinventing what this looks like now to have feminine ambition. And I imagine you're traveling the country and visiting people in different parts of the country, and you're seeing this in your own community.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any like concrete examples of where you see this like really happening well.
So the one I'm most familiar with, obviously, is my own home, because that's the one I see up close. And I do think I see excellent examples of it when I'm traveling, but you also just kind of dip in for a minute and then you're gone. But in Moscow, I just think it's hugely encouraging to see the effect of high-achieving, impressive women giving themselves to this. And I would say, okay, so one just concrete example I would say is Grace Agenda 4 years ago or something. The crowd was too big. We couldn't figure out how to. We used to, when people come to town, we tried to divvy them up for Sabbath dinners, you know, like with different hosts. There was too many people, we couldn't do it. And it was like 3 weeks before Grace Agenda. It was like, what are we going to do on Saturday night? And Moscow is a tiny town, and we have no resources as far as event venues, or we got no country clubs, you guys. There's nobody, there's like, it's very limited resources. There's like catering is very, and yeah, no venues that you could do anything with. And so my sister was kind of the spearhead of this, but she just was like, all right, ladies in the church, we're going to do this block party downtown Moscow. We have like no time to plan it. You're going to feed 2,000 people, you know, here we go. And it was amazing. It's like become the thing that is like the most look forward to now. We've done it 4 years maybe, something like that. So maybe some of you have gone. But it is incredible food. Like, it is incredible. It's not like, you know, it's not like we bought all the frozen hamburger patties in the Northwest and that's what we're doing. It's like, it's amazing stuff. And these women just jumped in, and it's become something that actually is now like kind of really formative. But that's because we, in our specific weird life, needed to be able to feed 2,000 people, you know. But not every church needs that. So I would certainly never say, like, so that's the goal, what you're going to want to do. It's like, what are the needs in your community? Like, what do you have to offer to, you know? And I think a lot of this is like problem solving. It's thinking outside the box. It's trying to get rid of preconceived notions. It's trying to like, okay, let's just start from scratch here and think like pioneers. Like, what are we going to do? And having to be aimed at your own people. And I think that's the thing that's so fun, is that when you go somewhere else and you see something that you have just not encountered, that's the best part. You know, like that's what you want if you go to France. You didn't want to go to France to eat McDonald's, right? The thing that you want to experience is the unique culture that they have. And so I think, yeah, just building that is the most persuasive thing. It's really powerful and wonderful. But yeah, I just think that's one tangible thing.
Yeah. Do you have any books you would recommend, like having teenage daughters, talking about feminine ambition, that can be something to read together and have ideas, good discussion?
I wish I could say yes, but I don't. I mean, it's very not, I mean, this really is a blank, I think. I know, so I don't know anything.
I read
Yeah, hidden art of filmmaking.
But I don't know any others. I've read that words.
Yeah, no, I don't know. And the thing is, the truth is a lot of the books that are sort of aimed at this are kind of the exact same thing that I'm saying don't do. Because it's like, it is like somebody just tell me what to do and I'll do it. You know, just give me the checklist and I'll do it. At the same time, those are hugely helpful because it's like, you might just learn 2 great ideas in it and then you incorporate it. But I would just say, you know, like those can be really terrific. But I would just be aware of anything that's like, follow these steps and you will, you know, achieve. Yeah.
I would like to answer that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to put a plug in, and you probably already read the book, but even Exile, this is the author.
I took my book.
I would highly recommend that to read with your teenage daughters. It's something that Karis has read. I don't think that Edie's read it yet, but she also has a what you call it, documentaries.
I guess, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we have watched that with our girls. Actually, the boys too. It's understanding sort of the history of the feminist movement. I think it's really important for our teenage
Yeah.
daughters. So there we go. It's a plug.
Here we go. I should have thought of that.
Well, actually, I watched the documentary this morning with my boys, and so that could be something for husband. I mean, my husband really enjoyed it. So
That's true, actually.
it was actually interesting kind of a conversation.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good. And honestly, I think there's so much of like social media that is just downright horrifically poisonous, you know, and so destructive, but it's also a huge resource. I mean, there are so many things you can learn. If you're on Instagram in order to sit around and envy other people's lives, maybe delete it. And there's so much just wasted time there, where, you know, the instruction that I, of course, can't remember the reference for about women who go from house to house, you know, it's like, now we can just do it sitting in our own house. We can just scroll around wasting our day looking at everybody else. And I think that can be a huge waste, but also, what a resource if you want to learn how to do anything, really. I mean, yeah, my feed is quite hilarious. It's like, this person is making plaster moldings and that person is making baskets out of something they foraged somewhere, and this person is making pasta. And this, yeah, you know, it's just, and it really can expand your horizon if you just don't know where to look. Or just like, that's what I mean, like, we have an embarrassment of riches. Like, it used to be what, you go to the library and we wander around and look for something that jumped out at you. I don't know, there's just so much. If you want to learn more about gardening, you want to learn more about cooking, you want to learn more about decorating. I mean, it's just at our fingertips, and at least it's like giving you an idea of where to go and learn, just learn more. Yeah.
As a young Christian woman, well, a teenage Christian female who's graduating high school, going to go to college, how would you say we as young women should navigate our next step in life?
Yeah, I would say America's pretty screwed up about what college is for. And so I would just say go into that with a real cynicism about, you know, depending on where you're going, be cynical about a lot of things. But I would also be thinking about it in terms of like, how is this phase of life that I'm in, like, am I on the path I want to go on or not? You know, like, obviously, if you don't want to be an orthodontist, you're not going to go to orthodontist school, right? Like, here's the path that I want. Am I heading towards what I want to ultimately aim at? Or am I just kind of kicking around and doing something because nothing else occurred to me? So I would just say try and be really purposeful about, like, where do I want to, God willing, end up? And if that's where I'm aiming, am I actually walking towards it, or am I walking off this direction? You know, there's a lady I was talking to who never, like, she ended up like a big wig in the State Department or something, and it was really because she just did an internship at like Patrick Henry or someone. They sent her to Washington, and then she got offered a job, and like she just kind of ended up there and hated it the whole entire time. But it was like, she's like, you just gotta get on the conveyor belt, and then there you were, and she ended up quitting and moving and whatever. But it was just like, go the direction you actually want to be headed, and don't just find yourself sucked off. So. All right, well, we should probably wrap it up so that you all can have, your day. All right, thank you so much.